Over the last 18 months, I have probably either written or co-written most of the UK guidelines on AI use within the TV and film industry. And I think that a lot of people aren't aware that those guidelines exist, or that the policy documents exist. Both Equity and Pact have published them and published them well. But that's not to say that everybody's aware of them. And of course, being aware of them, I think the overall concern is that networks, studios are going to find sort of workarounds, and AI will take over the world and do everybody out of a job. And certainly from my experience, that could not be further from the truth. So I have used AI in the last 6 months, we have had 4 commissions as a production company, uh, and 3 out of those 4 use artificial intelligence within the machinations of the format that we are making. And that is going to terrify a lot of people. But the most fascinating thing about all of that, and maybe it's down to the fact that the way that we work or the way that we approach, I'm not sure. But none of those formats have taken the place of a creative. So no jobs were harmed in the creation of those formats. In fact, quite the opposite. Actually, there has been more job creation by those formats coming into being, than anything else. A lot of the news, sorry, around AI within TV and film, um, is largely about generative images and generative video creation. So we all know about Sora, we all know about Runway, video creation tools. And the most sort of basic and fundamental thing I can tell you about that, that is widely agreed by all policymakers and networks, both in the UK and the US, is that we all agree that none of those tools can be used because they are all trained on unlicensed data. So from a commercial perspective, you can't use them. It would be illegal to use them. So the position of fear, very understandable fear that everyone's going to lose their job, um, is actually, has very little basis to it. Um, which hopefully should be of some comfort. When you get panelists saying that AI is coming for your jobs, and that'll be it, we're all, I think that does 2 things. Primarily, it's incredibly unhelpful to everyone's mental health, because the industry is going through such a state of flux at the moment that what you don't need on top of that is, well, currently there's no jobs, but in the future there'll be no jobs because of AI. That is broadly very, very unhelpful. And the second thing it does is it assumes a level of passivity from creative people that has hitherto been unknown. So we are all creative people within this industry, and the first thing that we do when we see a new tool is we work out how to play with it. And we explore what we can do and how can we create something new with it. And there's a level of excitement to that. I think we all have to acknowledge the fact, oh, let's use this tool and see what we can do. Guidelines and policymakers have said, right, okay, yes, there is potential with some of this, but actually a lot of this is potentially harmful, potentially dangerous. That there have to be certain guardrails that we put in place, and that we as an industry all need to have a responsibility to protect human creativity and human jobs. And all of those guardrails have now been put in place. So I don't think it's not remotely realistic uh, for a panelist to come out and say that all your jobs are going to be taken. There are post-production tools out there at the moment, and pre-production tools, that creatives are using. So I think ChatGPT is being used by the majority of creatives these days in order to expedite the development process and play around with it, and this, that, and the other. And that will, of course, have an impact at some point on development assistant roles and researchers and so on. And we have to look at what the edit process is going to look like with AI edit assistant tools that are coming in. I mean, bearing in mind AI edit assistant tools have been shaping and changing the industry for the last 18 months within Adobe Premiere alone. You know, the auto transcriptions. What that does is it takes away the menial tasks and the time-consuming tasks that none of us as creatives ever really went into. None of us as creatives went into editing to start, lengthily transcribing footage and doing the edit assistant jobs. That's not why any of us got into this industry. So that is reducing the amount of time you take for an edit assistant. So maybe that means that in 6 to 8 months, maybe edit assistant roles are going to be they won't disappear, but maybe they will be truncated. They will be got through in a quicker fashion. Um, and we need to look at what that does, because it's often then entry level jobs that disappear. So we saw this coming because, as I say, I've been working in and around AI for potentially longer than other producers have been in the UK. I'm not saying all of them, but certainly a large proportion. So when we set up Deep Fusion, which was launched last October, launched the 16th of October last year, one of the first things we did is we recognized that the entry level jobs were the ones that are going to be most affected. And I want you to be aware of a phrase that we use a lot within policy for equity and for PACT, which is the idea of behaving responsibly. So one of the first things that we did is that we set up a CIC, so a charity organization that will sit alongside our production company, so that any jobs that we get from using AI, a percentage of the money from those jobs goes into Fusion Media CIC, which will become a media training facility for the underprivileged and underrepresented groups within the industry to receive free training on the next generation of media creation tools. Because that's what we have to do, is to ensure that the industry moves forward. Now, I've just come back from MIPCOM, where I've spoken a lot about AI. You'll be surprised to hear, given that it's the hot topic at the moment. And when I've gone through everything that Deep Fusion has been doing, it has become very clear that there is a real appetite from other producers to work in the same way that as we are currently working. It's just the fact that they haven't managed to, find their way into it yet. But as soon as you point out what the answers are, actually the first thing that's happened is a number of producers have said, "Oh, do you know what? We'd really like to work with you on this," and so it's helped collaboration opportunities and it's helped production opportunities for us. So having that ethical baseline within the company has actually driven our company forward and our success forward. So I see that there is real financial incentives for companies to behave and work responsibly, because the reason that we have managed to get the commissions away using AI that we have is because we have the ethical framework and the CIC around it, which gives commissioners the confidence that actually, this is the ethical way forward and we can invest in this work because of the way that it is presented. The main barrier to commissioning at the moment is cost. So the cost of productions is too high for a number of commissioners to be able to stomach at the moment. AI production processes will make those shows cheaper, because things will be able to happen in a shorter amount of time. And that will allow for an environment where actually more shows can be made. So where the jobs within those productions will become shorter, they will actually be able to then move on to the next job much quicker. And the other thing that I think that will happen, so I think you'll end up doing more work, or the same, sorry, you'll be employed for the same amount of time, but you will have made twice the number of shows, if that makes sense. The other thing that's going to happen is that because all of these AI tools are largely available, at a fairly reasonable entry price, um, you know, we will all be able to, or certainly the next generation of filmmakers and obviously the current generation of filmmakers, should they wish to sort of be so inclined, have the ability to learn all these tools, at home. And so what will happen is that whilst the entry level jobs may well dry up, actually the ability to jump from an entry position to a more valuable position, is definitely there. It is definitely attainable. And so the training process actually probably could be quite quick. So we're in this state of flux at the moment where we have a slightly difficult period. I think, none of us are saying this is easy. We have the perfect storm where you have a lot of cheap tools claiming to be able to do the work that human creatives can do, and we have a scenario where the industry can't afford to pay people. So there is a perfect storm in there. But I can tell you categorically that every network I have spoken to, and I'll go on to one other thing in a second, because I think it's very important for people to know, there is nobody I've spoken to in any network that wants to move away from human creativity to creativity, human AI creation. ITV network put a job description out the other day for a head of creative generative AI, I think it was. And the Telegraph picked up on it and said, "Oh my God, look, they're now hiring ITV are hiring for a generative creative specialist, and it's going to do all the producers out of work." That was completely misrepresented. It was unfortunate that the ITV job description did say, head of creative generative AI role, I think was the phrase. And within that, it did require the job description did say that you needed to have an understanding of generative AI tools, in order to help with the assistant, in order to assist with the creation of new shows and so on. But that was one section of about 12 other things that they needed to be able to do. The role that they were advertising for was a technical role. It was an office role. It was not a forward-facing role. It was not a creative position, despite the job title. And it really fed in to the fears that people have of, or the article really fed into the fears that people have that they're just going to have their jobs taken away, and it caused all this furor. But no, that was never the intention. And also, we should remember that ITV doesn't actually make content. ITV Studios makes content, and ITV as a network, that role was there purely to support producers in the process of making their shows made by human creatives. And of course, that unfortunately just sort of made a lot of people very cross. And I think that maybe, the wording of the job description was perhaps a little bit insensitive to the time. But that was probably the biggest mistake they made, because actually, every production company I speak to is using some form of generative AI in order to aid the development of their shows and their work. I went over to LA at the start of this year to go and meet with the commissioners and networks over there. So I went to Warner Brothers and NBC Universal and Discovery and yada yada yada, Disney. And what was fascinating was the fact that we were taking these shows over that had AI in them, underpinning the machinations of a format, not just, using clever visuals. And the networks over there said, "Oh my God, these are brilliant ideas. They're things we could never have done before. They are of interest to us. Had you been based in the US, there's no way we could have these conversations. But because you're based in the UK and there's a degree of separation, actually we could commission these for you as long as they're made in the UK." And that creates this amazing opportunity for UK creatives and UK production companies right now to actually use the materials that are around, that are ethical and legal, and are trained on licensed data, that isn't scraped off the internet. And there are examples of of image generation that does that, and synthetic voices that does that, and LLMs that do that. And so at the moment, the UK has this massive opportunity to export into the US in a way that it hasn't been able to do before. So rather than being terrified of the fact it's going to take your jobs, absolutely, I would say that that couldn't be further from the truth. There are going to be evolutions of jobs, and yes, we all need to upskill and make sure that we're across all of these tools. And this is a very, very difficult time. And I'm absolutely not making light of the fact that, God, there have been so many stories this year of people being unemployed, and that is horrific. But I'm saying it's not all doom and gloom, and it's not all the fault of AI. There are real opportunities for people, and there is no interest from anybody I've spoken to for AI to take jobs. And the industry is doing so much in the world of policymaking to ensure that networks and broadcasters and production companies do the right thing when it comes to human creativity. So it makes it really annoys me when people say things that are so insensitive and so lacking in basis, because it does more harm and it causes more mental hurt to the industry that's already been sort of shafted enough, frankly. I don't know any other industry or any other sector that can just sit back and not retool and retrain. We every sector needs to continue learning. I think what's it called everywhere else, personal development or whatever, and that personal development is part of every other industry's um, job spec, really, is that they must continue to personally develop their skills in one way, shape, or another. And the media industry is not, we, we we're not isolated from that. We have to look after our own careers, and that involves moving with the time. That's, I want my job to be secure. So if I don't engage, then it'll all go away. And that's absolutely not going to be the case. Um, People need to get over the fact that yes, there are some cases and quite a lot of cases where training data is a real issue, and it cannot be used within the commercial industry. But the way that those tools work is something that we all need to be aware of, and we all need to know how they work, because at some point something will come out that is ethically trained and trained on licensed data. And then that will change the way that we all work. Creatives are creative people at heart. And when faced with a challenge, they don't just give up. They find a way of working with what's available. And that is the essence, I think, of what a creative person is. So this is not a stopping point for the creative industry. This is a new platform for us to work with.